Hey, what's going on guys? Jolts here, back with another video, and today's going to be kind of a different video because I've had this on my mind for quite a while. Something I do quite often is write a bunch of scripts about things I want to talk about in the Borderlands franchise, but those videos end up never being made, or I don't finish the script, or just other stuff. I don't want to, come off as ranting, or just a lot of different things. The goal for my channel is to be a happy place for Borderlands stuff and, show off some cool things on the side. But there are going to be times where I just want to talk and discuss matters. Alright, enough blabbering, let's go ahead and jump into the topic of the video. And that is dedicated farming and why we need dedicated farming for the future titles. As you know, dedicated farming has constantly been brought up over the years, but the big question is, why are dedicated drops so important to the community? I'm sure you know quite a few reasons, but I want to dive deeper into this topic. Dedicated farming isn't just a small part of the franchise anymore, it is a major part now. In fact, if you guys have ever watched any of the Borderlands content creators doing playthroughs like myself or K6 or any others, you know it's a major portion of our videos and it's something we love to do. It's a fun activity, right? Well, maybe fun for some, but we'll get to that in a minute, don't worry. So real quick, we're going to go through a timeline. So starting back on Borderlands 1, we had a few dedicated drop locations, but it was normalized to world drop farm in that game to get loot. No one that I know was really bothered by it since it was the first Borderlands game that set these standards for farming. Remember, this game came out in 2009, so looter shooters and stuff were kind of fresh and new. So dedicated farming was kind of a foreign concept at the time. Then Borderlands 2 came out and offered dedicated farming for almost every item in the game. People loved it and it was normalized for 7 years straight. Yeah, so when Borderlands 2 first came out, the legendary drop chance was a 1 in 30, which is pretty insane for today's standards. But remember, we came from Borderlands 1, so having any sort of dedicated farming was a plus. And so, going off of what I remember in the past when the game first came out, I really don't recall a lot of people complaining about the drop rates at all. Now, I'm not saying that nobody had a problem with it back then, but from what I remember, nobody really brought it up. Coming from Borderlands 1 to Borderlands 2, it was a way to farm. And I respected that we had, well, a way to farm. Later on in Borderlands 2's lifecycle, we did get a patch to triple the drop rates of legendary drops. So instead of most legendaries being a 1 in 30, they were now a 1 in 10. Now, I still vividly remember that patch day, and I was excited for it and went to farm savagely for a new Herald. And with the new drop rates being a 1 in 10, it just felt weird getting more legendaries than normal. I say weird, but I don't mean it in a bad way. It was just like very different at the time. But this was a change that we are all glad we got, and it made legendary farming for a specific variant a little more tolerable. Then the pre-sequel came out and dedicated farming was a complete mess. We had to farm the grinder for everything and no enemies respawned. And nothing really had dedicated drops, and I think one of the major reasons for why that happened is because at the time the community didn't have the best way to communicate with the developers. Like, we didn't have Discord or social media communication. The only way you can communicate with the developers was pretty much over the Gearbox forums, and even then that wasn't very good. Like, maybe the developers dipped in from time to time to see the post on the forums, but I really don't recall any of the developers replying to the post or taking them into consideration. Maybe they were, lurking in the background reading the post, but from what I could tell, the communication was low and maybe some of the major problems with the game were overlooked and were never fixed. Keep in mind too, this is the time before the stream team, so we didn't have, content creators on a team that relayed information to them. So if something was majorly wrong in the game, like the pre-sequel's farming system, then that means that back then the vocal community did not have an easy time getting their message heard to the developers. Now that's just one theory, maybe they didn't have time to develop it, or 2K Australia shut down. There's many other things that could have went wrong in between, but I do think it was one small reason why the game was left how it is. Fast forward to Borderlands 3, and now we have the content creator team, we have a lot of, communication back and forth, social media, Discord, all that cool stuff. And right away, dedicated farming was partially there, but it went mostly back to the world drop farming system. Some of us slammed into our keyboards respectfully and asked for the dedicated farming to be a thing in the game, and over time they did deliver on that. Even though I don't play much Borderlands 3 nowadays, I still respect that they made bosses respawn and have dedicated drops, and overall playthroughs were more fun, endgame was more fun, and people just liked their farming they had in that game. By no means is any of the games in the franchise perfect, but it was a blessing to have dedicated farming back. Now we're jumping over to present day, Borderlands drops, and dedicated farming was changed again. With it being tied to loot luck, dedicated farming was pushed back to be more of an endgame activity, so before you had an actual chance at getting a dedicated drop, you had to go out and farm these lucky dice, and a lot of people did not like that, including myself. I understand wanting to tie something different into the game in order to make it, well, different, but dedicated farming was changed again, and not a lot of people were on board with this. Now, I could go off on a whole side rant about the game, but I really don't want to do that, so keeping it simple, The loot pools were crowded, also everything's tied to the Chaos Chamber bunny farming, and farming in that game is just bland for a lot of people. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that some people might prefer farming this way, but coming from Borderlands 2 and 3, it was just a weird change for a lot of us. Those who mainly play endgame might not be bothered by it since the world drop farming is plentiful, but those who play new game runs don't really find their playthroughs to be that interesting after a few story runs. With players wanting their loot, they just speedrun through the story, ignore all the side quests, unless they need some XP or something or one of the blue items, and it makes new game runs kind of bland and the replayability does go down quite a bit. Moving on here, I do want to discuss the good and the bad with dedicated farming. I gotta be honest, it's not the perfect system, but it does offer a lot of good. So I have a lot of good things to say about it. So first off, more side missions will be completed. So players will be more tempted to complete the side mission, unlock the mini boss at the end of the mission, and then farm them for their dedicated drop. Players will revisit your beautiful maps. So if there's one thing that Borderlands is good at nowadays, it's definitely the map designs. And if there's no incentive to come back to the map, then why would players bother doing that? A good example is Knuckle Dragger in Borderlands 2, so that's the only reason people actually go back to Windsheared Waste. If it wasn't for Knuckle Dragger and the Hornet Farm, then we would never ever go back there. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's nice to come back and enjoy the beautiful scenery of maps. Next up here, players can better shape their build together during their playthrough. So if I want to do a melee run, I can go get my blade from a specific enemy, or I can go over here and get a unique shield from a unique enemy too. Or heck, maybe I want to do a splash build so I can go over to the, what's a good example in BL3? Anointed Alpha and get the Ogre? Or get the Flacker from that, what's his name? Was it Manbark? I think it was Manbark. So I can shape my build together and have these fun unique runs, and it does increase the replayability of the game. Moving on here, players can get a taste of the legendary rarity early on if they put the time into the farm. Looking at these statistics, millions of copies are sold, but how many of those people actually beat their games? So having a surprise dedicated drop legendary happen every now and then would maybe have a chance to hook the player on the game. You know, they get a taste of the legendary rarity, they think it's super cool, something rare, and maybe they end up spending more time on the game. I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but having a player get a taste of the legendary rarity early on, it might give them more time investment into the game. Now, here's one I don't hear a lot of people talk about, and I do think it's a pretty important thing for dedicated farming. Players get to find their own fast and creative route to a mini-boss. I think it's pretty cool the first time you find a dedicated farm location. For example, let's go with Savage Lee. So you know he spawns in that back area in Three Horns Divide, and you gotta find your fastest route from point A to point B. I mean, if you are doing a dedicated farm, most players want to find the fastest way to farm them in the shortest amount of time. Most players spawn at the fast travel, grab a car, drive over, jump out, and go for the kill. But some of the hardcore players spawn at the Frostburn Canyon door travel, run through the bandit camp, go up the side of the mountain, jump off the mountain, and go for the kill. Now, that route is a little bit faster, but it's just really cool to find your own creative path over to a mini-boss. And optimizing your farming time is just one of the fun factors in dedicated drop farming. The final thing I want to mention for dedicated farming is there will be more playtime in the game since it is an activity to do. I mean, pretty self-explanatory, you're playing the game longer, and that's a plus. Now, I'm not going to hide it, there are some cons when it comes to dedicated farming, but I do believe that with some changes here and there, most of the bad with dedicated farming could be eliminated in the future to make the game even better. First up, the obvious, players are going to get their hands on powerful legendary gear for early game, and I have no idea what the devs think about that. I don't think they probably have the best mindset when it comes to people destroying their game with these legendary items that early on. They most likely want you to go up the rarity scale. You know, you start out with your white rarity items, then you get a green, then you find the special blue item, and then, you know, you move up to purple, and eventually you get your legendaries. Look at Borderlands 2, for example. You get a Herald at the third map in the game, and also in that same map you get the fastball, and that literally one-shots everything for 10 levels. It's pretty busted, but it doesn't have to be. Think about it, it all comes down to balance, and this could be changed for a future title. But the way it works in Borderlands 2 is each level you get a little more power on your item. So the reason why the fastball, for example, is so brokenly overpowered is because it was balanced to work at endgame. Heck, look at Borderlands 3, you get the TK's wave in the second map in the game, and that will one-shot for, 18 levels? I'm not exaggerating either. If you guys saw my speedrun, you saw me using that gun for like 10, 15, 20 levels. It was buffed to work for endgame, but the side effect is it was stupidly broken for early game. My solution is have a new scaling system in place that will make legendaries perform slightly better than purples for early game, and then they scale to their true power at endgame. We know this is possible because they showed it off in Wonderlands with the Primordial Ascended gear. While that system is not perfect in any way, it still shows that you can scale it differently for the endgame content. Also, keep in mind if you're doing a casual run and not farming at all, the chances of getting a dedicated drop randomly in your playthrough are quite low. but for those who want to put in any time to farm, they will get rewarded for it. Alright, the second major bad thing about dedicated farming is save quit farming to respawn mini bosses is time consuming. Players have to watch many 10 to 15 second loading screens each farm, and watching a loading screen is quite boring. The major question is there a way to farm without save quitting each farm? You know, refresh the boss, refresh the map, refresh everything without doing a save quit. Well, we know this is partially possible because if you go back to Borderlands 3, in the Handsome Jackpot DLC, if you go back to the fast travel after killing Freddy, he will respawn again, no save quit necessary. So basically you kill Freddy, activate the fast travel, go back, run forward, Freddy's there again, and you can farm him over and over for loot. Same thing with these scrap traps, you can leave the arena, come back in, and they reset. So you can respawn those enemies over and over and farm them without save quitting. Obviously this is likely a glitch that never got fixed in the game, but nonetheless it still shows the possibility of respawning a boss without save quitting. Maybe they can capitalize on that in the future and, you know, if you refresh the map, then you spawn at the last save station you triggered, and then you can go over, take out the boss, and try to go for your dedicated drops. Alright, moving on here, we still have quite a bit more to talk about, so let's talk about the dedicated drop chances. I've talked to a lot of other content creators and players that play the Borderlands franchise, and it seems like the perfect odds for a dedicated drop for a lot of us are around 10 to 15%. That offers a fair chance at a dedicated drop without a dry streak, and while it does seem like a high number for some people, you have to keep in mind there are many rolls you can get on items nowadays. Heck, just for a specific element, divide those odds by 5. Yeah, now we're looking at a 2 to 3% drop chance for the right element on the item you're looking for. Unless the system changes for rolling specific parts or elements in a future title, drop chances cannot sit in the single digit drop odds. It would make legendaries way too rare and a lot of players would be turned off by this. I mean, look at people trying to farm a cryo sword explosion in Wonderlands. It is not a lot of fun. Now I do want to say that if we ever do get a higher rarity than legendary in a future title, like Pearlescence Return or something, then yeah, items like that should be super duper rare, super duper good, and fun to hunt for. As it stands in Wonderlands, heck, even Borderlands 2 is guilty for this, even Borderlands 3. Crowded loot pools, many different rolls you can get on it, elements, parts, the annoyance, or the, ascended, or whatever you call that part of the item, and the passives you can get on a class mod, the skills you get, and all that stuff. There are way too many variables and factors in an item that just don't make it fun to farm. Not every unique item in the game needs to be a 94 sham farm times 1 million. In my opinion, it's not worth the massive time investment for the little bit of power you get out of it. Okay, next up, there are a few more things I want to bring up about dedicated farming. The main focus for gear has shifted towards killing things and get loot. While it is fun, I do miss the alternate means of getting some cool loot. Back in Borderlands 2, we had a few unique items that were not tied to killing enemies. We had the Let's Go SMG just lying in a water puddle at Frostburn Canyon. In the Commander Lilith DLC, we had the M2828 Thompson. You can find that weapon by digging up a hidden gravesite. We had the Gwen's Head pistol hidden in one of 5 cardboard boxes. And we even had the Flint's Tinderbox hidden in a snowman's head if you shoot it off. As for the future titles, most of these farms kinda went away. So it would be cool to see more of these kind of farms in the future. Hiding secrets like these around your maps means more exploration and surprise factor. And it would also be cool to hide some secret mini-bosses that aren't tied to mission completion. For example, we had Savage Lee, you just happen upon him during your playthrough. You had One Punch in Borderlands 3, you pull the switches and randomly spawn him too. You had the Black Queen in Borderlands 2 who spawns randomly in the back of the map. And I know there's a lot more, but I'm not going to list them all off in this video. The fact is, 99% of unique enemies nowadays are tied to missions, which is understandable. But the surprise factors have went down quite a bit in the current titles. I mean, how many of you guys remember like finding Savage Lee for the first time, or Clark the Combustible, heck, Vermivorous, or even hidden gear like the Let's Go, Thompson, Gwen's Head, Tinderbox? I'm sure there's even more. Finding something out of the ordinary is a lot of fun like that, and I want to see more of that in the future games. One thing I do want to share is an idea that we brought up on stream before. How cool would it be to have a parkour tower in which if you get to the top, you're rewarded a unique item? And that unique item is always there, and if you make it to the top, you're rewarded with it. With the new sliding, mantling, and even slamming system in place, it'd be really cool to utilize that even more. Alright, this video is getting kind of long, but the final thing I'm going to talk about is the mission reward farming. Obviously, the read-only dashboard farming day should be over, but it still exists to this day because the other options for mission reward farming are not realistic at all. Adding mission rewards to the item of the day in Wonderlands was a nice touch, but the chance of getting the one you're looking for are slim to none. I mean, I can't even tell you guys how many times I save quit farm to get the mission reward. It was like Cryo Shotgun, I can't recall the name of it. Last Rites. Yeah, I save quit so many times to try to get that out of the vendor, and I never found it. I kept finding the other mission reward items I was not going for. Yeah, after completing a lot of side missions, the mission reward pool becomes so diluted that you will almost never find the unique you're after. Like I said, this results in boring save quit farming vendors, which is not fun gameplay. So I had two ideas that can improve this for future titles. First up, add the mission reward item to the mini-boss loot pool after finishing the mission. This was actually an amazing feature added to the BL2 Fix mod. For example, the mission reward for the Splinter Group side mission is the Rock Salt Shotgun. So after completing the mission, Splinter was given a rare chance to drop the Rock Salt right after. For the second idea, quite a simple one really, is having a mission reward vendor. It would only have mission rewards for sale, nothing else. Now we did kinda have this in Borderlands 3 with the Crazy Earl vendor, but it mixed in a lot of other non-unique junk in there and it still made it really hard to farm for the item you're looking for. I mean, no matter what, we're still gonna have save quit farming involved in order to get the thing you're looking for in the vendor, but the odds of finding the mission reward you're looking for go up quite a bit. While having a mission reward vendor is a pretty cool idea, I still feel like there's a lot of gray area in it. I mean, what's going to stop you from getting mission reward items on level every time? I guess they could make the mission reward item a high price, or maybe it takes a special currency, or heck, maybe you unlock this vendor after you complete the main story first. No matter what, vendor farming has never been fun in the franchise for a lot of people, including myself, so tying it to a mini-boss after you complete the side mission seems like a better bet in my opinion. Anyways, I think that's all I want to talk about for dedicated farming today, so let me know below in the comments what you guys think about all this. As it sits right now, endgame farming is fine with the world drop system when it comes to Wonderlands. Now I'm talking about world drops, not dedicated drop. World drops are there for the people who like to farm for that stuff. The only thing I would take into caution is the excessive amount of rolls you can roll on certain items. Odds should be a little more realistic and not a 1 in 5 billion chance. Dedicated farming is a major reason why a lot of us play the older titles, including myself, and not the current ones. Yeah, it isn't just a little side feature, it is a big factor and motivator for a lot of us fans. Without it, new game runs feel hollow and the replayability is not there for us. So I really hope the developers for the future titles can take this information and put it into consideration. This information here is not all from my head, this is just stuff the community has echoed over time. And at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, which is the ultimate best Borderlands title to date. We just want more options for farming, not less. Dedicated farming was almost non-existent in Borderlands 1, became a major staple in Borderlands 2, went back to being non-existent in the pre-sequel, was partially there but then got better over time in Borderlands 3, and was partially there and lost its way in Wonderlands. To summarize, we just want consistency in the future titles, and hopefully we'll see that day come. Anyways, I think that's everything. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you later. Peace out.